Hello everyone, welcome back. I know it has been a minute since I mentioned that I go to Imperial, but I still do that. And today I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks on how to write a really good personal statement that can help get you into any uni that you want. I'm going to break it up into 3 parts. We're going to talk about the contents, what you should put in it, the tone, and the style of the personal statement. So the content of the personal statement should include a few sentences about why you want to study the subject that you're applying for. It should talk about any work experience you've done related to the subject and any sort of supercurriculars you have. So I'm going to go through the different kinds of supercurriculars you can include in your personal statement. The first thing is wider reading. Wider reading is reading that is done outside of the scope of your A-levels, your IB, whatever you're doing, things that aren't included in the syllabus. This shows the university that you have a genuine interest in what you're studying and a passion to learn more about the subject. When it comes to the books you're reading, don't pressure yourself to understand every single part of the book. Most of the books that will be recommended to you are probably quite high level, and so although it's important to understand the main concepts of the book, you aren't expected to recall every single sentence and understand every single idea in a lot of detail. If you can't afford to buy books, I would suggest going to your school librarian and asking if they can buy the book for you, depending on how well funded your school library is, or you can go to a public library which is free. I recommend checking the inventory online before you go if that's possible. Try and be flexible with your reading. If you can't find the exact book that you want, there'll probably be a book about something similar that you can pick up instead. Plus, it's always good to pick something a little uncommon. Interviewers can get bored when they have to listen to another person talking about The Theory of Everything by Stephen Hawking. Try to be critical when you're reading the book, form your own opinion about what you think of it. I know this can be hard, say if you've just read your first book about the stock market, how are you supposed to know if it's a good book or not? Read reviews, but again, read them critically, constantly asking yourself, do I agree with this? And not learning other people's opinions. Another supercurricular would be relevant clubs and societies. Being in a club related to your degree choice is really important. I know in America they care if you're like the captain of the volleyball team and the lead in the school play, but UK universities really are not all that impressed by stuff like that. Maybe if you're a head girl, it's worth mentioning it. Otherwise, don't go into too much detail about things that aren't related to your degree choice. So if you're applying for English literature, they want to know if you were chair of the Literature Society, what books you read, what kind of things you discussed. If you're applying for engineering, were you in Robotics Society, something like that. Another supercurricular you can include are personal projects. This can be an EPQ, or you can make something. When I was applying to university, I made a closed loop temperature control system which had a temperature sensor, and when a high enough temperature was reached, a fan would turn on. If you can't afford to buy the parts for your project, you can look up a YouTube tutorial of someone online doing the project. It's not as good, but you still get to go through the process of how to do it and how it works. Again, it's not as good as doing the project yourself, but it's still more interesting than the leadership qualities you gain from being a camp counselor. Another supercurricular activity are competitions. Most competitions can be found easily online. They can be essay writing competitions, something where you go in a team and compete in rounds. I did a competition called the UKSDC, which stands for the UK Space Design Competition. If you are mentioning any competitions that you've done and they have acronyms such as the UKSDC, make sure you say the full name of the competition, because the people reading your personal statements are not going to be up to date with all these different competitions, and it's better if you just make it clear for them exactly what the name of the competition is and what it is, because unless it's a maths or physics Olympiad, they're probably not going to know about it. And that's a good point actually. You should try and do maths and physics Olympiads. Even if you don't get like a gold award, it's still worth trying it and doing it, because you learn a lot of good skills from doing those sorts of things. And the last supercurricular activity I have to tell you about is kind of educating yourself. So doing a summer school, doing online courses, watching lectures online. I know MIT have a lot of their lectures online, so if you're applying for anything like engineering or science-based, then you can watch some of those and write about them in your personal statement. So once you have all your work experience and your supercurriculars written down, you might be kind of confused about how you can form them and shape them into a personal statement. So something that I did that was really helpful was to write down qualities that I thought made a good engineer, since I was applying for engineering. And I actually have them written down here. This notebook is 4 years old, and on the first page I have these skills, and it just says like well-rounded, focused, committed, leadership and teamwork, problem solving, analytical, creative, logical, independent. And I basically use these words to help form and flow throughout my personal statement. I had my supercurriculars written down, and then I also had these characteristics that I wanted to tie into the supercurriculars. So I could say something like doing the UK Space Design Competition taught me how to be creative and solve problems, things like that. So once you have some ideas about what the content of your personal statement is going to be, we can now move on to stage 2, which is the tone. I think it's really important to establish a tone, especially in the first 2 sentences. So something like, ever since I was young, I always wanted to be a biomedical engineer, is not a good opener, because first of all, have you? It's so generic. 80% of personal statements start with this sentence, and it's not genuine. Like, have you always wanted to be a structural engineer since you saw the Millennium Bridge collapse when you were 8 months old? Like, probably not. It's really important to talk about smart things in your personal statement, but it is just as important to talk about them in a smart, intelligent, and eloquent way. I feel like the tone of personal statements is something that is vastly underrated, and if you have the right tone, it can really help make your personal statement stand out and set you apart from other applicants. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about the style of your personal statement. This is really simple. The style should be catered to an expert. If you're applying for mechanical engineering, don't explain how a motor works. It's a waste of words, the person who's reading it already knows, and it doesn't really set you apart or make you any different to anyone else. Okay, so for this last part of the video, I'm going to find some personal statements online and review them, basically. We can go through them together and I can point out what makes them good and what could be done better. Okay, so I just found this website called University Compare. It's got loads of different personal statements and it's organized by subject. So let's look at aerospace engineering. Okay, let's take this one. Okay, so it starts, man-made birds of the 21st century move through the air, enormous lumps of metal, 200,000 times heavier than seagulls, that inspired the idea. How? It's all down to today's engineers, who have developed the fundamental ideas of flight, first put forward by the Wright brothers in 1903. And then it goes on to talk about how this person was inspired by some lessons at the RAF cadets to study aero. So my initial reaction is that it's not really catered to an expert. I'm mentioning the Wright brothers, mentioning the uses of aircraft. I feel like you could just take out the first 2 sentences and just go straight into the fact that the RAF cadets is what inspired their interest in aero. So they go on to say, I jumped at the chance to spend a week at RAF Cosford in a residential work experience for the WISE campaign. So I mentioned this before, like we don't really know what the WISE campaign is. Women in space engineering? Women in science and engineering, maybe? Oh, is this a girl? I thought it was a boy for some reason. I don't know why. Man-made. I think it's because the first word of the statement is a man, so I just thought it was a boy. Okay, so the next part is quite emotional. That's okay. I think it's a different way of showing your passion, and that is one way you can do it, which is quite effective. I really like the last sentence of this paragraph. Engineering is a combination of innovation and creativity alongside precision and accuracy, meaning that my 4 A-levels are a good platform for me to start on my path. It would be better if it was phrased in a different way, such as like, okay, so I don't know what her A-levels are, but I guess the person reading it would have access to that and they could check if they wanted to. But maybe she could say something like, maybe if she does A-level design, like that's taught her innovation and creativity. If she could say that she's learnt the value of precision and accuracy from experiments in her physics A-level. Things like that make it more focused and easier for the person who is reading your personal statement. I didn't mention this before, but you want it to be enjoyable for the person who is reading it. You don't want it to be confusing and have long drawn-on sentences that aren't really connected properly. But she talks about her scholarship, which is really good, and she talks about some wider research she's done, which is good. Okay, so the next 2 paragraphs are not really related to the degree that much. The only thing that is related is in the last paragraph she talks about her interest in motorsport. I think that she maybe should have focused more on that and not devoted a whole paragraph to her job at Clark's and being an Avon representative. I think that the motorsport interest is much more interesting since it's related to her degree. Okay, let's look at another one. Okay, I think the opening of this personal statement is really good. It's for a physics application. The first sentence is, the varying scale of physics study. Oh, wait, that reads weird. Actually, that reads weird actually out loud. The varying scale of physics study is what excites me, is what most excites me. The varying scale of physics study is what most excites me. Huh. That's almost like they didn't proofread the first sentence. Anyway, the thing that I liked about it was that the person immediately talks about how they're interested in the universe from the scale of like the small parts to the large, like existing like fundamental laws, and relates that immediately to themselves and why they find it fascinating and why they want to study physics. So what I like about this one is that it's not colloquial at all. I felt like the other one was quite colloquial, with phrases like "I jumped at the chance," things like that, are less professional and eloquent. I know you may receive advice talking about making sure the personal statement sounds like you. It's really not important that it sounds like you. It needs to sound intelligent and passionate. And even if you don't perceive yourself as a particularly intelligent person, it's okay for the personal statement to sound smarter than you think you are. Because first of all, you probably are as smart as it sounds in the personal statement. And secondly, it's not like they are going to notice if you are more eloquent in your personal statement than you are in your interview. They read so many personal statements and they interview so many people. If you're accepted, it's not like in your first tutorial your personal tutor is going to say, you're not as eloquent as it was in your personal statement, and then kick you off the course. That's really not going to happen. Just try and make it as intelligent as possible, and I like how this one is a bit more professional and it's not too colloquial. They talk about the books they've read, which is really good. They talk about a project they've done, the fact they're a STEM ambassador, and then the last paragraph, only 2 sentences that aren't totally related to the degree, and then I guess the RAF cadet part could be related to the degree more than it actually was. But other than that, I think there's a nice structure. I really like it when it has those 2 sentences at the beginning which say why exactly you're suited to study what you're applying for. And it's nice to like end with those like kind of less relevant extracurriculars. But I definitely think organizing the largest RAF Air Cadet section in the country as a cadet warrant officer could have been spun more like related to the degree. Maybe like this could have led them to read a book or something about it, and that way you can use your supercurriculars that you otherwise wouldn't think are related to your degree and spin them so that they are. But anyway, I think that is all for the video today. I hope you found it interesting and useful. If you did, feel free to subscribe to my channel and I will see you next time.